So I want to start and thank you all for being here tonight. This is the first of our To Serve with Love programs, which is a program this February to, to honor February, which is this, a month we honor love, but also we in our congregation at the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco have as our covenant that we love is the spirit of this church and service is its prayer. And so love and service are really central to who we are and how we think of ourselves in the world. And so we thought it would be fun to ask some members of the congregation to talk about what it is they serve with love, what they're committed to in their lives, excited about, and serve with love, or excited to serve, committed to serving with love. And so our inaugural moment in this is this evening with Bob Bacon. So I'm going to light our chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition. It will be out of view for the rest of the hour, but just know that it's here lit, a reminder of the symbol of the faith tradition that draws us all together. And I thought we would start with, Bob, you just telling people a little bit about your connection to First U Society and also what where you work and what you do for a living.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa, for inviting me. I live and work in Oakland. I have my office in my home. I look out over Lake Merritt. I practice law. There's three parts to the work that I do. The one that we're going to talk the most about tonight, I represent a number of people under sentence of death for appellate and post-conviction review of their convictions and death sentences. I also have a number of criminal appeals in non-capital cases, most of them in the State Court of Appeal in Los Angeles. And I also do some resource and consulting work, writing training materials and consulting with other lawyers, helping them with the representation of their own death sentence clients. I've been a member of the San Francisco Church since 1994. This is my fourth UU congregation. This is the first time in my life that I lived in a place where one had a choice of UU churches. I actually checked out 4 of them and decided to join the San Francisco Church.
Wonderful, thank you. I thought we'll start tonight, just so everybody knows, with some questions, and then at the very end we'll have time for some Q&A too. So first thing I wanted to ask you, Bob, is how did you find yourself exposed to this particular issue of the death penalty, and how and why did you get drawn into it as deeply as you have?
I'd had some academic interest in the issue all along at a time. The direct story begins in the late 1980s when I was actually working the other side of the street, handling criminal appeals on behalf of the prosecution, working for the state of Alaska, and began to hear the reports of the great need for qualified lawyers to represent people under sentence of death, people who were familiar with the criminal law and opposed to the death penalty. So gradually I saw that I was one of the people they were talking to. At that time, there was a risk that the Alaska legislature might adopt the death penalty. Fortunately, that never happened. If they had, I would have had to find another job because I couldn't work the prosecution side of the street in capital cases. And the third thing was that some of the most inspiring people that I knew were the ones doing this work. So this very gradually came to outweigh my need to get into this work, came to outweigh my need to stay in Anchorage. And I sent off some inquiry letters to Northern California 4 hours before the Loma Prieta earthquake. And the following summer, moved back to California and began representing capital clients, which I've done ever since. I can't hear you, Vanessa.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. What has the road been like in this work for you?
It's a very different road from the people who do this work in some other parts of the country, since California seems to have a great need to have the death penalty, but not actually conduct executions. So I have not had a client killed. That's not a testament to my skill. It's simply a testament to the dysfunctional nature of the California process. I must go on to say that people I love have had clients killed, and that's worse than anything anyone would want to go through. Even that is a death in the family. My job is to learn and tell stories. By definition, they're not happy stories, because by definition, there's been a murder. Someone has been killed suddenly and traumatically. The stories are a lot more complicated than they are in fiction or in the movies or even on the TV news. Homicides happen for reasons. They can never be excused, they can never be justified, but they can almost always be explained. People find themselves in situations that you or I could avoid getting into quite easily, or you and I could find our way out of quite easily, but they spiral downward into violence. And learning in great detail that story of where the client came from, who he is, who his family is such an important part of the work. It's putting individual human face on things that are too often seen as aggregated statistics, such as domestic violence or ambient environmental exposure to lead. Population of death sentenced clients is an extremely diverse one, but the closest thing to a common thread is exposure to what are called adverse childhood experiences. The acronym is ACEs, things that happen to a child through no doing of his or her own that reduce the risk that they can transition into a productive adulthood. Serious illness, the death of a sibling or a parent, being raised by a parent with a developmental disability, living in a neighborhood that's suffers gang violence. Those are some of the kinds of things that we're talking about. People tend to be very resilient. Most people can survive one of these and come out as an intact adult. Very few people can survive 4 of them, 6 of them, and come out capable of handling the responsibilities that are expected go along with being an adult. So too often there's a downward spiral. It can be addiction, it can be gang violence, it can be mental illness, can be physical illness, name it. And this is this is the history that's so very common with capital clients. And one of the very sad things is that too often the client's legal team is with them for the long haul to a greater extent than anyone ever has been in their lives. The people who were supposed to, who they looked up to and depended on and were supposed to take care of them, whether it's a parent, a step parent, a school, a foster care system, a juvenile institution, whatever, has one after another have let them down. And sometimes we're in the position that for the first time that someone who is with them, someone that they can count on over the long haul.
So that sounds like that's maybe one of the aspects, this piece about you being in relationship to someone and not just their lawyer, but someone who cares about them. That sounds like that's a piece that is maybe part of the joyful piece. I mean, joyful, not in the sense of celebration, but meaningful piece of it. I mean, keeping someone alive is meaningful, but it's a long journey that you're with these folks. So it's like, where
Yes.
is the sustenance and the power of that relationship?
You're absolutely right that is an important part of it. It's not something you learn in law school, and it's not something that's in the job description. But if the job is done well, it includes that. And you're right that it like any human relationship, especially a close one, it can have its aggravating moments when it drives you up the wall, but it can also produce the kinds of rewards that you were talking about. Absolutely.
So what is it that keeps you going in the midst of this? You know, I imagine it's super hard to be in this work where the stories that you're hearing, I mean, you said you haven't seen as many people put to death, so that's obviously makes it a little easier, but the stories and the struggles are always, like you said, hard ones. Why stay at this work? What keeps you going in it?
We talk very consciously about a calling, the same way you and your colleagues use that word. One of the things that keeps me going is my colleagues. I'm part of a national community. We in regular email, telephone contact. One of the things I sorely missed from the COVID shutdown were the in-person gatherings with colleagues around the state and around the country. I draw so much strength from that, and keep in mind how much more difficult it is for the people who do this work in Lubbock, Texas, or Huntsville, Alabama, compared to those of us who do it in Northern California, both in terms of community support and money, as well as everything else. Just an example of the kind of community this is, at the Arizona Capital Representation Project, which is a small shoestring nonprofit that does capital representation and consulting in Arizona. The staff of that project knows me as Uncle Bob. One of the very first continuing education programs that I went to when I started in the work, I was told that from among the people who you share, with whom you share a capital client, are likely to come some of the best friends you will ever have in your life. And that has proven true for me in more than one instance. We,
What do you mean when you say you share a capital client?
no one can do this work alone. It's a team effort, both because of the amount of work that's involved, the vastly different skill sets that are required, and the need to keep each other going. It's work that involves book and library lawyers like me. It involves courtroom lawyers. It involves mitigation specialists, people generally with MSW degrees who have special training to help people talk about the deepest secrets of their lives and the deepest secrets of their families. It's gumshoe investigators who know how to find people who don't want to be found and get people to talk who don't want to talk. It's people who organize documents on paper and electronically. It's a team effort.
And how do you pull together your team? How does that team get assembled?
Varies a lot. There are institutional defender offices. I was part of one a number of years ago. I'm now a sole practitioner who takes cases on ad hoc court appointments. I share some of them with other sole practitioners. I share some with institutional defender offices. The other kind of people that I'm talking about, the investigators and the paralegals and so on, some are employed in agencies. Some of them also work freelance. There's agencies in the state and federal administrative offices of the courts that handle logistics and arrange for the billing and the payment of public funds.
So, Bob, I find myself wondering what it's like when your heart leads you to hard places, the way yours has. When your calling is one that is all about, except for, the camaraderie of your colleagues and the close relationship and sense of meaning that you have with your clients, for whom you are often one of the few people who has cared and stuck with them. But like, what is it like when your heart and your calling leads you to a hard place like this? Where do you find grounding in that?
To the extent that's a different question than the one you just asked me, President Kennedy said we were not sending men to the moon because it would be easy. We were doing it because it would be hard. It's among many other things, it's an intellectual challenge. There's an endless variety of both legal and factual issues. I feel sorry for lawyers who do the same thing 1,000 times over. I think my life is more interesting. I like to think it's more rewarding. One time long ago, I had to quit a job because too little was expected of me. A word that really resonates with me is intensity. I don't always live up to it, but it's an important guidepost, an important aspiration.
Is to live with intensity, you mean?
To live with intensity, to work with intensity. to expect much of others and hope that they expect much of me. We know that we aren't alone, that there are people who treat cancer patients. There are first responders. There are ministers who counsel with cancer patients. There are ministers who counsel with people whose families are falling apart. We aren't alone in the business of vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue or caregiver burnout. That there's a lot that we can learn, a lot of support that we can get there. And backing up a few steps, we walk in the footsteps of folks who came before, of folks who worked for the abolition of slavery. The people who oppose the death penalty very consciously have adopted the word abolish and abolition from the people who worked against slavery in the 19th century. People who worked for the humane treatment of the mentally ill, for the settlement and acceptance of immigrants, for the rights of women, LGBT, and so on. We are among the latest in that long procession across the generations.
Yeah, it's a beautiful lineage to be a part of. I think you're right.
Yes, it is. And so many folks gone before, and so many folks in the procession now have it so much harder than we do.
Yeah. So let me take a little moment and see if folks who are here with us have some questions that have come up for you so far that you want to ask Bob. Hello, Howard. Hello, Merle. Hello, Melvin.
Oh.
I have a personal experience that I'd like to ask Bob about. I answered the doorbell one day and there was an attorney on my door. I don't remember, it's probably, I don't know, 15 or maybe years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And he told me that one of the child that I was the same age as my son when we lived in Philadelphia was on death row, and I guess her appeal was coming up, and so I invited him in and we had a discussion. I guess it was her appeal, and I was in total shock. I couldn't really believe it. I don't think that I had anything that would have helped her to offer, but she had killed 3 people. They were janitors, and she killed 3 people, and the one, so she got the death penalty, but she's at San Quentin right now. And then, you know, maybe another 10 years later, I got another attorney coming to my door, and went through the same thing. You know, it didn't really make any difference, but I don't know. You know, what would be this is the experience of someone who's received the, you know, interview. Is that what you would call it, Bob, or what would you have to offer to? Her name is Celeste Carrington, and she's. Do you know any women on death row?
Not personally, and I don't represent any. I've certainly heard Ms. Carrington's name. I've been the person who has rung those doorbells out of the blue a few times, and don't sell yourself short and be so sure that you have nothing to contribute. that and the process takes forever, and for better and for worse, and teams and staff turnover, and sometimes different people ask you the same questions 5 years apart, and sometimes that's necessary, and sometimes it probably isn't. And if someone had taken a better look at the files before they went out in the field, they might or might not have realized that they didn't need to ring your doorbell a second time. On behalf of Ms. Carrington and her team, thank you very much for speaking with the people who knocked on your door. I hope they treated you kindly and were very appreciative of the time that you gave them.
Well, the only thing that really upset me the most was that the family had moved to the Bay Area from Philadelphia, and I certainly didn't want to see the family or have them know where I was. And apparently the attorneys were able to get my information because I'm a registered architect. So the architect, board, gave up my information, but I couldn't get any information about them. But it did upset me that they might be showing up at my door.
A licensed investigator can find anyone fairly easily, even with less, even something less obvious than a professional license like you had. An ethical investigator also does not share that information unnecessarily, and does not share it with a criminal client or with members of the criminal client's family. So with a trained and licensed and ethical investigator, I think you have nothing to fear. And I do know that that it surprises people not in the business how easy it is for a licensed investigator using various proprietary online tools to find just about anyone.
I do have a listed telephone number, so if they wanted to find me, as long as they knew I was in the Bay Area, I don't think it would have been any problem for them to show up my door.
Yeah, you made it easy. You made it so much easier than so many of the people that they're trying to find. Yes.
So, Howard, did you have any questions or a question?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I think, in this issue, I think we're dealing a lot with empathy. And the question is the empathy for the murdered person, as well as empathy for the guilty person who did the act. And the conflicts, I think, are there as to how do you treat people in order, if you want justice to be, without ending up taking another life. And one of the things that I've looked at very recently, this case that's current, where the police did the no-knock entry and murdered a man. I've noticed is fascinating. The parents were happy with the concept of life in prison for the guilty parties, just as in the murder of the man in Georgia who was hunted down as though he was a criminal because he was black in the neighborhood and they killed him. It seems as though more and more people are willing to accept that a life in prison or something of the equivalent is acceptable punishment and not a death penalty. And I was wondering if Bob do you see more of this these days, or these just happen to be two cases that are unique?
I do see it. It is becoming more common, both on this, the individual level you're describing, as well as on a more societal level. For better or for worse, a person serving life in prison is forgotten.
Yeah.
They don't get their name in the newspapers. Their victims don't get their names in the newspapers. The survivors of their victims don't get the name in the newspaper. Someone's under death sentence. That knock on the door that came to Merle can also come to the family members of the homicide victim, either from someone connected with the legal process or someone connected with Channel 11 News, asking them to relive the worst day of their lives 16 years later after they've done their best to move on. That's one of the costs of the death penalty, and more people are realizing it. More and more prosecutors are more candidly explaining that to the survivors of victims, and that's so it is a positive trend. The criminal justice system is still not treating the victims of violent crime or the surviving family members of homicide victims as well as we should be, but we're doing better than we used to, and we try to be more sensitive. Don't know if any of you recall Kathy Harrington, who was a member of our congregation while she was in seminary at Starr King. And very soon after she entered the ministry, her adult daughter was murdered. And she helped to negotiate a life sentence for the perpetrator. She went very public with the case. Over the years, she has devoted a large share of her ministry to restorative justice, in particular for victims of violent crime, but also more generally, and has tried to make this helpful, hopeful ministry out of the terrible tragedy that she and her family endured.
I don't think I know. The name is familiar, but I didn't know that about her. Huh. I have a question. Oh, so sorry, Melvin, did you have a question that you wanted to ask Bob?
I just want to ask how the shutdown of death row and transfer to prisoners, how will that impact your work?
We don't know yet. It's the move of death sentence prisoners into the main lines of the prisons, along with other prisoners serving lengthy sentence for violent crime. It's a hopeful sign. It's a recognition that they don't need to be singled out, that they are like the other prisoners, and hopefully will be a step forward toward ending the death penalty on an individual basis or large scale. It raises a lot of questions that need to be worked out. Some people will be further from their families. Some people will be closer to their families. Some will be further from their legal teams. Some will be closer to their legal teams. Some will have Some will have opportunities to work or to go to school that they don't, in other prisons that they don't, that they don't have at San Quentin. Some will be uprooted from the only home that they've known for most of their adult lives. That's traumatic enough for any of us, and for people with psychological or cognitive limitations, it's that much harder. So on the broad scale, it's a step in the right direction. There's lots of things that will need to be worked out over the coming months and years to make it happen successfully.
Well, how many clients would you have at one time?
I have 5 capital clients, the same ones that I've had for a number of years, all of them under California death sentences, 4 of them at San Quentin, and one of them at one of the other prisons.
How often do you see them? Do you go visit? I guess during COVID, not at all, but before COVID, how often would you be in their company?
Yes. Probably each client 2 or 3 times a year, and I'm one of 2 or 3 people visiting them on a similar schedule.
Mm-hmm. And Bob, you mentioned the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if the study of those and the growing depth of knowledge about the effects of ACEs on people, on their physiology, structural, cognitive abilities, and so many other things. I wonder if that has, because you mentioned it, if that's actually changing and helping the fight against the death penalty.
Probably minimally so. The people who are interested in those things are against the death penalty for 14 other reasons before they know about that research. Innocence and exonerations has changed more minds than anything else over the last 20 years. 180 some people who were sentenced to death around the country by unanimous juries have been found by appropriate governmental authorities to have been wrongly convicted and have been released and have the convictions discharged, 6 of them in California. That has made more difference than anything else. Racial issues change minds. Roughly 85–90% of the people under death sentence are there for killing a white person, even though the risk of being murdered, like most bad things in society, falls most heavily on people of color. But the death sentences tend to come in white victim cases. Financial cost changes some minds. It's counterintuitive, but very true that the cost of litigating a capital case is more than cost of keeping someone in prison for the rest of their lives.
What's the thing that is most convicts you about the truth of the fact that the death penalty should not be? What's the underpinning for you? Which argument is the one that most persuades you?
All of the above, and the utter inability to define who this subgroup of people is, and that sets them apart from other people convicted of murders and violent crimes. Wait, Professor Charles Black of Yale, paraphrasing the Talmud, he said that though the justice of God may indeed dictate that some should die, the justice of men and women is always and altogether insufficient for determining just which ones they are.
Ooh, that's a great quote for
yes,
keeping everybody happy, right?
yes, yes. And more and more conservatives are opposing the death penalty than they used to. It's still not enough, and still not as many as the people on the progressive side. But between financial costs and people who are pro-life and libertarians who don't trust the government to know which pothole to fill, or reluctant to trust the government to decide which people to kill.
And the slippery slope argument, right?
Yes,
You,
yes, yes.
Well, we got rid of the death penalty in California once, and I don't know what was wrong with people that got it back again, but we had fought it the first time and were successful, and then we had to fight it again. And so far we haven't been successful at getting it passed.
50 years ago next week, California abolished the death penalty.
wow.
It stayed abolished for a few months, and I think there's maybe.
Why only a few months? How can it only have taken? Doesn't it take longer than that for sessions of government leaders to get together? Why only a few months?
Time it took to qualify an initiative constitutional amendment for the November 1972 ballot. And we're Governor Newsom is committed to ending the death penalty in a way that it will stay abolished. And that's why he's testing the waters. I don't think he knows how he's going to get to that point. The infrastructure for opposing the death penalty, both in litigation and public advocacy, is much stronger than it was 50 years ago. There's more support for abolition from elected officials. The death penalty is drying up and dying out incrementally. So a California without the death penalty sometime in the 2020s, I think, would be less of a shock to the body politic than it was in 1972 when we were re-electing Richard Nixon to the presidency on a law and order platform. So that 11 states have abolished the death penalty in this century. There has been a backlash in most of them, and in most of them it hasn't gotten very far. It fizzles out after a little while. So
Bob, if people want to get involved in trying to work to abolish the death penalty in California in a way that would be more permanent, what do you suggest? What organizations, what efforts?
With respect to the death penalty specifically, we'd encourage support for Death Penalty Focus, www.deathpenalty.org. There are incremental bills pending in the legislature now that would chip away at corners of the death penalty and give opportunities for litigation and organizations like the ACLU, Organization Equal Justice USA, the Ella Baker Center, based in Oakland, named after a friend of Martin Luther King's, are lobbying and advocating for those measures. We have to recognize that that the death penalty may be more likely to stay abolished if it's abolished a few prisoners at a time, which some of this legislation, some of this litigation is doing. Excuse me, I'm hearing voice.
There.
Okay, everybody still here? And something not specifically directly related to the death penalty, those of you who live in San Francisco need to support your district attorney, Chesa Boudin, who is facing a recall effort by some of the same folks who tried to recall Governor Newsom. And if San Francisco takes out a progressive district attorney, it would set back criminal justice reform nationally for years and years and years. So send money to Mr. Boudin, campaign, tell your friends and neighbors, put up the signs, do all that's necessary to turn back this challenge to a district attorney who is leading the nation away from not only the death penalty, but other outdated and racist schemes of law enforcement.
Great. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Any last questions before we close for the night?
I was just gonna say that in the Richmond area, there are petitions all over the place trying to have you vote for the recall. It's said the Asian community has been hit hard with anti-Asian violence, and they are taking this route, unfortunately, to support a recall of the district attorney.
You know what? I will reach out to some of the leaders and ask if that's who, you know, like Norman Fong, and ask if that's true or if that's being manipulated or what the
Well, I've just
arguments
seen
are.
the petitions at stores, and when I've been in the neighborhood, I've seen them. Yeah, it's really sad.
Yes.
Find out more about it, and if I find anything out, I'll send it to you guys. So we all.
Thank you.
I was
Howard,
going to ask
any
about
last
is
thoughts? Oh, Melvin,
yeah.
good. Mm-hmm.
Amnesty International, are they a good group to go with the death penalty?
Excuse me?
Amnesty International.
Yes, another excellent organization that has worked against the death penalty for many years.
And they meet at the church. Yeah, they used to meet at the church.
I remember.
I don't think they do now. No, I'm not aware of that.
Well, nobody's been meeting much at the church, but maybe maybe we will.
Invite them back.
Yes, exactly. Of course.
Yes.
Well, Bob, thank you very much for being the kickoff speaker, and very appropriately so, for the To Serve with Love set of conversations, because you do serve with love and ferocity, deserving of the issue, something that is close to many of our hearts, and speaks to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and justice and equity in ways that we all have staked our lives to when we're members of this Unitarian Universalist faith. And so thank you for all that you do and all the heartache and all the intensity that you bring to it. And thanks for being here tonight to talk about it with all of us.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the support.
Thank you, Bob.
Yes,
Keep doing it.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah,
All right.
Can't wait to see you in the flesh again soon. So we
absolutely.
I know.
Zoom.
Yes.
I know. It's so true.
Mhm.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And
Night.
Howard, good
Thank
luck
you.
tomorrow.
Thank you,
right?
Vanessa.
Yes, absolutely.
Pardon?
Is tomorrow the big day?
Today. That's why I was a little delayed.
Oh, it was
Jan had
today.
her knee repaired today. She's in the hospital. She had her right knee replaced with a bionic device.
And
So,
how is she doing?
she's doing very well. I was just saying goodnight to her before I got delayed to get on the meeting here tonight. She's in
Okay.
the hospital room, and the surgeon said everything went fine. So
Good.
Great.
Which hospital is she at?
she's at Mission Bernal, CPMC Mission Bernal Hospital.
Oh, on Cesar Chavez?
Yeah, Cesar Chavez.
Oh, that's right next. Like I'm a block away. Do you think I can go?
You
suit
can't
up
get in. I couldn't get in.
Oh,
They do not, I was talking to her on the phone and texting all afternoon, but they do not, because of COVID, they have no visitor position right now. So I brought her there 10:30 this morning, and we've been communicating all day, but
well, ask her when you talk to her if she's allowed to have a minister visit. Every once in a while,
oh,
they make a little minister exception, and I'll
okay.
wear my N95.
Oh, yeah,
happily.
okay, I'll check in the morning. I think it was
And I'll do an antigen test too.
I think it was a pretty strong no, but
okay. All right.
we'll find
All right.
out.
All right. Well,
But she's doing
all right.
very, very well.
Good, but yeah, thanks.
She's okay.
Good.
So, sorry that I was a little delayed.
no,
Yes.
not
Because
at all.
of
I thought it was tomorrow for some reason. Okay. All right. All right.
Yes. Bye.
Lots of love, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.